And I'm sure Oji Udemize is checking on his tablet if he made money at the marketplace yesterday. Good morning. It's nice to have you.
Yeah, morning, boss. My pleasure. How you doing?
You're going through that, and I think you're just checking your stock portfolio.
Well, the days are not quite interesting, but I mean, we have to.
It's good to have you on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sure you keep your eyes on that. Being a former banker, I'm sure you got your eyes on the markets.
Yeah.
You have investment in the market. Talk to us when you see these very high volatility, again, because, well, China is bleeding. China is a little bit, it's wobbling, let me put it that way.
Yeah,
give us your understanding. What's happening to your accounts, your portfolio right now, portfolio of investment? Don't tell us the size. But,
it's good you mentioned the issue of size.
Don't mention the size.
Don't mention the size. We are still growing, and we will get there. Usually for people who are into speculation, this is a very tough period for them. You know, you have to keep a very close watch, very close eyes on the market, because the prices are just, going crazy. They go up and they come down. You know, just like last Monday, we saw the whole global market bleeding, because of Chinese, the problem in China. And that problem does not seem to be getting any better, because the Chinese economy is really, really challenged. And right from the U.S.,
to the UK,
to South America, to UK,
France,
all the markets are responding very sharply to the Chinese downturn. Okay, slow growth in China, and even America that experienced some good growth last year is having some temporary setback.
The manufacturing data out yesterday was
because
down.
America and China are so interwoven in terms of export-import dynamics. I mean, they depend on each other so greatly.
Bring it home for us about how your portfolio is looking like in the market. As a former bank, I'm sure you have an eye on the financial
I'm not sure
system.
you want me to discuss my portfolio in the open.
No, I don't want you to talk about stocks you hold. But again, if you look at how is this impacting you?
Of course, prices are dropping. If you look at the all-share index, our own market index, it has not done well this year at all. So, I mean, prices are dropping. So just like I said, if you're doing speculation, this is going to be a tough time for you. All right. When the bank's result came out a few weeks ago, we thought that was going to drive, quite some volume, in the banking sector especially. But that has not happened that much because, we also are faced with other challenges. Investors are still pulling their money gradually. U.S. is also framing up their monetary system, whereby we're seeing, possible rise in interest rate in the U.S. So capital outflow from emerging markets back to the U.S. is still happening. And that combined with the tapering of the QE, and it's not helping the emerging economies. The Chinese problem, the announcement of the devaluation of the currency, has also not helped some major economies in sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, South Africa, Angola, and the rest of them, because Africa is still commodity-based economy.
Okay, well, let's continue the conversation, and you're firing on all fronts, as it were. Just hold on there, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll get into the key conversation why Oji Udemize is here in Lagos talking to us about the new Treasury single account and the heat on the back of the neck for all the banks. But what should the central bank do? We'll discuss that in the next 1 or 2 minutes. All right, welcome back to the program. Let's get the second part of the show going. The man who is sitting in our Abuja studios to talk to us about the deadly business of livestock business in Nigeria is Mohammed Bello Trokro. He's a pastoralist, and we talked to him a few minutes ago and talking about the spate of violence in Nigeria. According to Human Rights Watch reports in December 2014, more than 3,000 Nigerians have lost their lives in that communal violence between herdsmen. And that's, if you put that together, that's averaging about 600 lives lost every year. And that's quite significant. Mohammed Bello Trokro, well, thank you very much for sticking with us in Abuja there. Thank you very much, sir. Are you still there?
Yes, thank you. Good morning.
I'm sure you're listening to the conversation about investing in stocks and bonds. You hold cattle, so you're a pastoralist, and you're very active and passionate about that. Are you involved in the financial markets?
No, livestock is actually the informal economy that is hardly getting quoted on the stock exchange. We probably in the future will get to that level, but for now, it is just the informal economy that hardly count in what you are doing. And I think it is great that you are putting on a show that is talking about stocks, banks, and other security issues.
I'm sure you'll be interested in the commodity exchange.
Very well, very well. In that rate, probably because I am a lawyer, I need to put in more to get on board that. But actually, I'm a livestock owner. I own a small herd of cattle, a small herd of sheep, and then very actively involved in the promoting and advocating for pastoralists in Nigeria.
Okay, we appreciate your time. We'll get back to you very shortly. Just aside, just to get you into the conversation. Let's get back to Orji Udemeze, who's I guess here on the program for the next 30 minutes, I think, to talk about the new Treasury single account. This is something that's been in the news. So it's no longer news breaking, as it were, but again, we need to dig a little bit deeper. Orji, thank you very much for sticking around. Let's continue this conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
And let's start from here, kind of a bit of a recap. What were the banks doing with the federal government money before the TSA was introduced?
Well, before now, we used to have what you can call a fragmented banking arrangement, when it comes to federal government revenue. That's a case whereby departments of government, ministries, departments, and agencies of government had the freedom, as it were, to open their revenue accounts or operating accounts, in their own commercial banks of choice. In that case, the Central Bank of Nigeria, absorbed itself of any involvement in retail banking for government agencies. So in that case, all government funds, as released to federal governments, state governments, and local governments, will naturally go to their own choice accounts, where they chose to. And banks were meant to maintain these accounts for these agencies, and then, of course, sweep necessary balances to federal government at some point, like the FIRS account and all those revenue accounts, key revenue accounts. Naturally, they will sweep later. But the argument is that the system has not helped government in capturing its cash resources properly. All right, so you find some allegations, where it's alleged that banks are meant to sweep some balances to the consolidated account of federal government. Don't do that as often or regularly as they should do that. And also some kind of collusion by some public servants who would refuse to do those sweeps and instead sit on those monies, perhaps invest in short-term instruments and earn things, earn some yield on those funds, while the services they are meant for are not carried out. And again,
how did we get to a situation in which government agencies and banks come together to sit on the revenue of a federal government?
No, remember, we're not saying that they sit on these accounts. It's possible it's happening. It's an allegation. But we also can state that from what we know, banks naturally will not want to release those funds at will. So you may find a situation whereby those funds are kept for much longer than they should stay in those books. But more worrying, is actually the fact that federal government at some point may be looking for cash to execute important projects and budgetary activities. And then those cash, or cash balances might be lying in different accounts of government agencies, and while CBN goes back to the money market to shop for funds, to go and borrow money through treasury bills.
Whereas in the same banks,
exactly.
In the same banks, let's slow down a little bit. In the same bank, you got a government money. Then the same banks using money from the same bank to buy the same government treasury bills and charging the government XY amount.
Government, in a way, is borrowing its own fund money and paying dearly for it. And then you find that driving the interest rate on treasury bill high, because if government is so hungry for funds, it must necessarily have to offer an attractive rate on treasury bills to get funds. Then you pay for those funds, and then you tend to now drive interest rates so high that you crowd out the real economy. So by government's heavy involvement in the open market operation, you find that many banks now find the T-bills a safe haven for keeping their funds,
easy trading market,
for making their money, and then it can be convenient for you not to take the bigger risk of financial intermediation in the real sector, whereby
because you get in 14% or 15%
exactly.
from the
So why do I have to
lend
lend somebody at 18%, 20, take all the risk, risk of loss of my money, and take all the sweat, spend all the money going to court to pursue your money, monitoring the credit, paying staff and all of that. So you can quietly, cut off all that cost, put your money in treasury bills, make a lot of
So
returns.
we've created so much paper money.
A lot.
So much paper money
a lot of that.
by the banks in Nigeria at the detriment of the federal government.
And not just federal government, of the whole economy. Of the whole economy. As we go on in this discussion, we can see all of that. It's very important that we safeguard our banking system I'm going to come to that later. So I'm not going to support a situation whereby we take actions that will actually make the banks fail. Banks are critical in this economy in terms of helping us mobilize deposit for investment in the economy.
Do you agree that there is a rot in this accounting system of the government that needs to be cleansed?
Corruption is a major issue.
No, it's not just about corruption. It's about lack of transparency.
You know, lack of strong institutions, lack of transparency, lack of seeking the common good. People are acting for themselves. People are not thinking about the good of the nation, about the good of public institutions, about the quality service that we are meant to provide to this nation. So if I am the managing director of a ministry or an agency of government,
or PAMSEC,
am I acting in the overall interest of this nation in terms of deploying every available resource, whether it's cash or other kinds of assets, in ensuring that I implement the budget for which I had earlier committed to implement for the year for the good of the nation?
And if you generate revenue, that you should also remit it.
In fact,
as and when due.
Yes. You know, what's happening now is that the federal government has found itself at the mercy of these agencies, instead of the thing being the way, you know, all
hold on. The government created agencies to which the same agencies forced the federal government on its knees.
Because the law requires, you know, appropriation law requires that every revenue must accrue to government a priori. That's at the central
into the consolidated.
Point. Yes.
Yes.
And then based on approved budget, which everybody discussed ab initio, you know, before the year started, that is how much you will spend for this and all of that. Then the Parliament, that's the National Assembly, will now properly appropriate funds to these agencies as, you know, recommended by the Constitution. But
how do you get to collect money and you spend it?
So these are the issues that we have been suffering in this country over the years. And you find successive governments had known about this leakage. You know, this issue is not just a today matter. If you remember, the then Honorable Minister of Finance and the current Minister of Economy had given an order that as at February 28, 2015, you know, that all revenue-based revenue-backed accounts, RBAs, must be closed in all commercial banks. Well, for key, then the emphasis was more on Nigerian customs, FIRS, and because these are the key sources of revenue.
For example.
That all those accounts must be closed, and then all funds move through an electronic platform to the consolidated revenue account of government. That effort is still just for the same purpose of trying to capture revenue as they come. That was not given much attention. Of course, you know, the election was on then, and everybody was worried about getting elected, re-elected, and all. So not much attention was given to that, and the level of compliance to that instruction was less than impressive. Less than impressive. And that problem has been carried over from one government to the other. So now that's where I commend this current government if they will drive this policy to its reasonable conclusion. Because you find a number of agencies' body language saying we have not yet been informed. We haven't got a deadline yet. We don't think we are involved. We may likely get exempted. So people are still, you know, being reluctant to obey this.
To change.
But I think this is a necessary change at this point in our lives. We may eventually go back to that situation whereby commercial banks will take over the retail banking activities for federal government agencies. But for now, I think it's important that we take a stock as to how well are we doing with management of our resources. Government needs to reduce its cost of borrowing. Government needs to have the Ministry of Finance needs to have a broad and unified view of every amount that accrues to government agencies, so that we can also now say these funds are here. You know, you don't need this for now. Let's use them for other purposes. Or based on the budget you are giving, this amount you need to spend this year, return the remaining funds to the central account. Because of course we're going to still have different one central account of federal government, and of course now sub accounts that will be linked to the TSA, that's the Treasury Single Account. So the dynamics, there are issues around model, the kind of model you design for this, how you can implement it, the legal issues as to independence of certain bodies in government. If a government body has been given independence, fiscal independence by the Constitution, you may have to look at how do you deal with that issue in connecting them with
so we may have to go back, we may have to go back to the National Assembly
issues
to look at the Constitution on one hand, and perhaps the legislative issues relating to those
to make sure that we are able to implement this successfully, so we don't get stuck at some point.
Okay,
we'll look at them in more details when we come.
Okay, let's come back after the break. Thank you very much. Orji Udemeze is still sticking around with us to talk about the Treasury Single Account. We'll be right back.